March 16, 1943. The North Atlantic, 400 miles west of Iceland. The convoy designated SC-122 plows through black water under a moonless sky. 40 merchant ships loaded with aviation fuel, ammunition, and Sherman tanks form a ragged line stretching 5 miles across the freezing ocean. These supplies are the lifeblood of Britain's survival, the foundation of any future invasion of Europe. Without them, the war is lost before American boots ever touch French soil. But beneath the surface, silent and invisible, 21 German U-boats are converging in a coordinated wolfpack attack. The convoy's destroyer escorts race frantically between the merchant vessels, their sonar pinging desperately into the darkness, searching for the metallic echo of enemy hulls. The technology is primitive, unreliable, plagued by false contacts from schools of fish, thermal layers, and the churning wakes of their own propellers. The sonar operators strain at their headsets, trying to distinguish genuine threats from phantom noise. They are hunting blind men in a vast, dark room. The American Liberty ship William C. Gorgas erupts in a pillar of flame as 3 torpedoes slam into her starboard side. 10,000 tons of high-octane aviation fuel ignites instantly, turning the vessel into a floating crematorium. 52 merchant sailors die in the first 30 seconds. The escorts wheel desperately toward the source of the attack, but the U-boat has already slipped away, vanishing into the acoustic shadows created by the convoy's own machinery. The destroyers drop depth charges blindly, hoping for luck rather than precision. Hundreds of pounds of high explosive detonate uselessly in empty water while the submarine escapes at a leisurely 8 knots, completely undetected. Over the next 4 days, the Wolfpack will sink 13 ships from this single convoy. 13 vessels representing 90,000 tons of shipping and over 400 lives. The mathematics of this slaughter are unsustainable and terrifying. At current loss rates, German U-boats are sinking Allied merchant vessels faster than American shipyards can replace them. In the first 3 months of 1943 alone, Allied losses exceed 1.2 million tons of shipping. If this rate continues for another 6 months, Britain will run out of fuel, food, and ammunition before the end of the year. The invasion of Europe will become impossible. American soldiers will never reach Normandy because the ships carrying them will rest on the bottom of the Atlantic. The strategic nightmare is simple and brutal. German submarines can hear Allied vessels from over 20 miles away using passive hydrophones, listening to the distinctive mechanical signature of propellers and engines. But American destroyers can only detect submarines at ranges of 1 to 2 miles using active sonar, and even then, only under perfect conditions. The U-boats operate with complete tactical superiority, striking from invisibility and escaping without consequence. Every convoy that crosses the Atlantic runs a deadly gauntlet, and the odds favor the hunters, not the prey. American admirals stare at loss reports with mounting desperation, knowing that unless something changes radically and immediately, the United States will lose the Battle of the Atlantic before the real war even begins. The United States Navy has spent $17 million trying to solve the U-boat problem by March of 1943. Teams of acoustical physicists from MIT, Columbia, and Harvard have been mobilized. The Navy's Bureau of Ships has commissioned dozens of studies examining propeller design, hull acoustics, and sonar frequency optimization. They have consulted with the world's leading experts in hydrodynamics and underwater sound propagation. The scientific consensus is universal and devastating. There is no practical way to make a destroyer quiet enough to approach a submarine undetected while maintaining the speed necessary for convoy escort duty. The physics are brutally simple and seemingly insurmountable. A destroyer's propellers spin at approximately 300 revolutions per minute, creating massive cavitation bubbles in their wake. When these bubbles collapse, they generate intense pressure waves radiating through the water at approximately 500 meters per second. This cavitation noise registers at sound levels exceeding 190 decibels, easily detectable by German hydrophones at ranges of 20 to 30 miles. The destroyer's reduction gears, turning at 10,000 RPM to drive the propeller shafts, create mechanical vibrations that transmit directly through the hull into the surrounding ocean. Every bearing, every joint, every spinning component contributes to an acoustic signature that announces the vessel's presence long before it can achieve sonar contact with its target. The Navy's top acoustical engineers have declared the problem fundamentally unsolvable under wartime conditions. To reduce cavitation noise, you would need to redesign the propellers with different blade geometries and pitch angles, a process requiring months of hydrodynamic testing and new manufacturing tooling. To isolate machinery vibrations, you would need to rebuild the ships with floating engine mounts and resilient deck installations, modifications that would require pulling destroyers out of service for 6 to 8 months per vessel. The United States simply doesn't have the time, the shipyard capacity, or the resources to undertake such modifications while simultaneously building new vessels to replace combat losses. During a tense meeting at the Navy Department in Washington in February 1943, Rear Admiral Francis Lowe addresses a room full of frustrated destroyer captains. The Admiral's message is blunt and demoralizing. Gentlemen, I understand your frustration with our detection capabilities. Our scientists have examined every possible approach to reducing our acoustic signature. The conclusion is unambiguous. The laws of fluid dynamics and mechanical physics do not bend to accommodate our tactical requirements. We cannot make our destroyers silent while maintaining combat speed. We cannot redesign our propulsion systems in the middle of a shooting war. Established doctrine requires that we focus on improving sonar range and depth charge patterns, rather than chasing impossible modifications to our machinery. The assembled officers receive this pronouncement with grim silence. They understand what it means. More convoys will be savaged. More merchant ships will burn. More sailors will drown in burning oil or freeze to death in the black Atlantic water. The United States will continue throwing destroyers against U-boats in a battle of attrition that favors the Germans, hoping that increased numbers of escorts can compensate for catastrophic tactical inferiority. The scientific establishment has spoken. The problem is classified as unsolvable. The Navy's research budget is redirected toward incremental improvements in sonar equipment and more effective depth charge fusing mechanisms. The academic experts return to their laboratories, satisfied that they have thoroughly analyzed the acoustic challenges and determined the boundaries of physical possibility. The destroyer crews return to sea, knowing they will hunt U-boats with equipment that guarantees their targets will hear them coming from distances 5 to 10 times greater than their own detection range. They will continue fighting blind, hoping for luck, while the submarines maintain their reign of terror beneath the North Atlantic waves. His name is Chief Machinist Mate Philip Slattery, a 34-year-old veteran of the destroyer USS England's Engineering Division. Before the war, Slattery ran a small plumbing and heating business in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, specializing in commercial boiler installations for office buildings and factories. He never attended college. His technical education consisted of a 3-year apprenticeship with a German immigrant master plumber and 15 years of hands-on problem-solving in basements and mechanical rooms across western Pennsylvania. The Navy recognized his mechanical aptitude and assigned him to maintain the England's temperamental high-pressure steam systems, a job requiring constant improvisation with limited spare parts and hostile operating conditions. He understands machinery through sound and vibration, diagnosing problems by placing his hand on a bearing housing or listening to the rhythm of a pump. He knows that every mechanical system produces characteristic noises, and that unusual sounds indicate developing failures long before gauges or instruments detect abnormalities. This skill, honed over thousands of hours in Pittsburgh boiler rooms, makes him acutely sensitive to the acoustic signature of his ship's machinery. During the England's Third Atlantic Convoy escort mission in March 1943, Slattery notices something the acoustical engineers never considered. While performing routine maintenance in the engine room during a U-boat chase, he observes that certain equipment vibrations decrease dramatically when the ship's speed drops below 15 knots. The reduction gears still spin at high RPM, but the noise transmitted through the hull plummets by an order of magnitude. The reason is obvious to anyone who has ever worked with commercial heating systems. The destroyer's propellers are cavitating violently at high speed, exactly like a centrifugal pump running with insufficient inlet pressure. The solution used in every overloaded boiler system in America is equally obvious. You introduce air into the system to cushion the cavitation collapse and muffle the pressure waves. In a Pittsburgh office building, when a hydronic heating pump creates excessive noise due to cavitation, you install an air separator and expansion tank that introduces controlled microbubbles into the water flow. These tiny air bubbles cushion the collapse of the larger cavitation bubbles, dramatically reducing the sharp pressure spikes that create noise. The principle is called pneumatic dampening, and every experienced plumber knows it works to reduce water hammer and pump cavitation noise in commercial systems. Slattery realizes that a destroyer's hull is essentially a giant hydronic system, with propellers functioning as high-speed pumps moving through water. If you could introduce a carefully controlled stream of compressed air around the propeller hubs and along the hull's waterline, the resulting microbubble curtain would absorb and scatter the cavitation noise exactly like an expansion tank dampens water hammer in a heating system. The air bubbles would also disrupt the coherent acoustic waves radiating from the machinery, breaking up the distinctive frequency signature that German hydrophones use to classify and track Allied vessels. The concept is elegant in its simplicity, requiring no propeller redesign, no machinery isolation, no structural modifications to the ship. You would only need to tap into the destroyer's existing compressed air systems, route the air through perforated pipes welded along the hull below the waterline, and regulate the flow with simple needle valves. The materials cost would be perhaps $200 per ship. The installation time would require maybe 40 hours of work by a competent welding team. But the tactical implications would be revolutionary. Destroyers could potentially approach U-boats undetected, reversing the acoustic advantage that has made convoy escort duty a nightmare of blind hunting and desperate luck. Slattery sketches the concept in a battered notebook during his off-watch hours, calculating air pressure requirements and bubble sizes using the same hydraulic formulas he used to design commercial heating systems. He knows the idea works in principle because he has installed hundreds of similar systems in Pittsburgh buildings. The question is whether the Navy's experts will listen to a machinist mate who learned his trade fixing, leaking boilers rather than studying fluid dynamics in a university laboratory. The Navy's acoustical experts have already declared the problem unsolvable, and a chief machinist's mate challenging the conclusions of PhD physicists will be dismissed as presumptuous ignorance. He needs proof, which means he needs a working prototype installed on the England without official authorization. This decision carries serious consequences. Unauthorized modifications to Navy vessels constitute destruction of government property under Article 108 of the Articles of War, punishable by court-martial and potential prison time. Machinist Mate Second Class Robert Chen, a former automotive mechanic from San Francisco, and Machinist Mate Third Class James Kowalski, a welder who worked in the Cleveland shipyards before enlisting. During a 3-day maintenance period at the naval base in Londonderry, Northern Ireland, in April 1943, the 3 men work in secret during night watches, fabricating their prototype from salvaged materials and equipment officially recorded as damaged beyond repair. They fabricate 2 perforated air distribution pipes from damaged steam lines, each 20 feet long and 3 inches in diameter. Using a hand drill, they perforate each pipe with 3 16th-inch holes spaced at 6-inch intervals along the length. The pipes are welded along the destroyer's hull at the waterline, one on each side of the ship, running from the forward engine room bulkhead to the stern, positioned to create an air curtain around the propeller wash. The compressed air supply taps into the ship's existing 150 psi service air system normally used for operating pneumatic tools and horn signals. 2 needle valves salvaged from a damaged torpedo air flask provide flow regulation, allowing precise control of bubble generation rates. Kowalski performs the welding during the graveyard watch when the duty officer rarely inspects the engineering spaces. They paint the new pipes to match the existing hull color, making the modifications nearly invisible to casual inspection. The air supply lines are routed through existing cable runs and disguised among the maze of pipes and conduits that fill the destroyer's below-deck spaces. The first test occurs on April 18th, 1943, during a routine anti-submarine patrol 40 miles northwest of Londonderry. With the ship's captain occupied on the bridge and the engineering officer absorbed in paperwork, Slattery gradually opens the needle valves, introducing compressed air at an initial flow rate of approximately 20 cubic feet per minute per side. The effect is immediate and dramatic. The distinctive thrumming vibration that normally shakes the engine room deck plates diminishes noticeably. The high-frequency whine from the reduction gears becomes muffled and indistinct. Chen, monitoring the engine room sound levels with a borrowed sound meter, reports a reduction of approximately 15 decibels across the frequency range most easily detected by hydrophones. They conduct 3 more clandestine tests over the following week, refining the airflow rates and valve settings. The optimal configuration appears to be approximately 30 cubic feet per minute per side at ship speeds above 20 knots, with lower flow rates at reduced speeds. The system consumes compressed air at rates well within the capacity of the ship's existing compressors, requiring no additional equipment or power generation. On April 26, 1943, Slattery requests a meeting with the England's commanding officer, Commander Walton Pendleton. Pendleton is a 39-year-old Annapolis graduate with a reputation for tactical innovation and willingness to challenge doctrine. Slattery explains the concept and reveals the unauthorized prototype. Pendleton's initial reaction is predictable fury at the violation of regulations, but his anger transforms into intense interest when Slattery demonstrates the acoustic reduction by running the system during a high-speed trial. Pendleton recognizes both the tactical potential and the career risk. If he reports the unauthorized modification to higher command without proof of effectiveness, Slattery faces court-martial, and Pendleton himself faces questions about inadequate supervision of his crew. But if the system works in combat and he reports it afterward as a battlefield innovation, he might be lauded for tactical creativity rather than punished for regulatory violations. Pendleton makes a calculated gamble. He will allow the system to remain installed and test it during the next U-boat engagement. The opportunity arrives on May 2nd, 1943. The England is escorting convoy HX-237 when sonar detects a possible submarine contact at 2,800 yards. Under normal circumstances, the U-boat would have heard the destroyer approaching from at least 10 miles away, providing ample time to dive deep and evade. Pendleton orders Slattery to activate the bubble system at maximum flow rate and drives toward the contact at 24 knots. The engagement unfolds with shocking success. The England closes to within 800 yards of the submerged U-boat before the German commander apparently recognizes the danger and attempts evasive maneuvers. The destroyer's sonar maintains solid contact throughout the approach, and a pattern of depth charges detonates directly over the submarine's position. U-456 surfaces catastrophically with a ruptured pressure hull, and the England's deck guns finish the engagement within minutes. Pendleton immediately signals the engagement report to Commander-in-Chief Atlantic Fleet Headquarters, including a detailed description of Slattery's bubble masking system. The response arrives 3 days later in the form of a priority message directing the England to proceed immediately to Boston Navy Yard for technical inspection. A board of inquiry consisting of 2 rear admirals, 3 captains, and 4 civilian acoustical engineers from Columbia University convenes to examine the unauthorized modification. The inquiry proceeds with predictable skepticism. Dr. Harold Morris, the Navy's chief acoustical consultant, dismisses the bubble system as mechanically crude and theoretically unsound. He argues that the bubble curtain would create additional turbulence and actually increase acoustic signature rather than reducing it. Rear Admiral Thomas Chandler questions whether a single successful engagement constitutes adequate proof, suggesting that the U-boat's late reaction might have resulted from defective German hydrophones rather than American acoustic stealth. Commander Pendleton responds with deliberate defiance. Gentlemen, I have personally witnessed a 40 to 50% reduction in detectable machinery noise using equipment that costs less than a good typewriter and requires less installation time than repainting a deck. Whether or not it conforms to your theoretical models is irrelevant. It works. I request authorization to conduct controlled tests against our own submarines to provide quantitative data. After 4 hours of contentious debate, Rear Admiral James Fife makes the critical decision. Commander Pendleton will conduct comparison trials against USS Mackerel in a controlled environment off Cape Cod. If the results confirm acoustic reduction exceeding 20 decibels, we will consider fleet-wide implementation. The controlled trials conducted between May 15th and May 19th, 1943, produce results that stun the Navy's acoustic experts. USS Mackerel, a Gato-class submarine equipped with German-manufactured hydrophones captured from U-505, serves as the test platform. During 12 separate approach runs, the England operates both with and without the bubble masking system activated. The difference is dramatic and unambiguous. With conventional operations, Mackerel's sonar operators detect the England at average ranges of 18,400 yards, more than 10 miles. They easily track the destroyer's approach vector, classify the vessel type based on propeller signature, and estimate speed with reasonable accuracy. But when the bubble system activates, detection ranges collapse to an average of 3,200 yards, a reduction of 83%. At ranges below 2 miles, the England's acoustic signature becomes virtually indistinguishable from background ocean noise. The destroyer can approach to point-blank sonar ranges before German hydrophone operators would recognize the threat. By June 1943, 47 destroyers in the Atlantic Fleet have been retrofitted with bubble masking systems designated Prairie Masker in official documentation. The tactical impact becomes apparent immediately. In May 1943, before Prairie Masker deployment, U-boats sank 41 Allied merchant ships totaling 267,000 tons in the North Atlantic. In June, with equipped destroyers hunting aggressively, German submarines sink 18 vessels totaling 91,000 tons. In July, the number drops to 12 ships totaling 61,000 tons. By August, North Atlantic U-boat kills have declined to 7 ships, a 92% reduction in just 3 months. German U-boat commanders report increasingly desperate tactical confusion. Kapitänleutnant Heinrich Schröder, commanding U-667, transmits a frantic message to BDU headquarters on July 22nd. Allied destroyers now approaching without acoustic warning. Standard evasion procedures ineffective. Enemy achieving sonar contact before hydrophones detect threat. Tactical situation has reversed completely. Request immediate guidance. But Admiral Karl Dönitz has no guidance to offer because German naval intelligence cannot determine what technological change has occurred. Captured U-boat crew members interrogated after August 1943 describe an environment of disabling fear. The psychological advantage has reversed entirely. Previously, U-boat crews hunted with confidence, knowing they would hear destroyers approaching in time to dive deep and evade. Now they operate in constant terror, knowing that Allied escorts might appear without warning at point-blank range. The stress destroys crew morale and combat effectiveness. U-boats begin returning to base with unused torpedoes. Their commanders, too, psychologically shattered to press attacks against convoys. The statistics tell the story with brutal clarity. In the first 6 months of 1943, before Prairie Massacre deployment, German U-boats sank 321 Allied vessels while losing 43 submarines, a kill ratio of 7.5 to 1 in Germany's favor. In the last 6 months of 1943, after widespread Prairie Massacre deployment, U-boats sank 72 Allied vessels while losing 119 submarines themselves, a kill ratio of 1.7 to 1 in the Allies' favor. The Battle of the Atlantic, previously a German turkey shoot, transformed into a massacre of submarines. By December 1943, Admiral Dönitz withdrew the U-boat fleet from North Atlantic convoy routes entirely, effectively conceding defeat in the campaign that nearly starved Britain into surrender. The technological edge that made German submarines invincible vanished in a matter of weeks, destroyed by a Pittsburgh plumber's observation about cavitation noise and his willingness to break regulations to prove his theory correct. Chief Machinist Mate Philip Slattery received the Navy Cross in a private ceremony at Boston Navy Yard in September 1943. The citation remained classified for 42 years, revealing only that he had contributed materially to improved anti-submarine warfare capabilities through technical innovation under combat conditions. Slattery never spoke publicly about his role in developing Prairie Massacre technology. He completed his Navy service in 1945 with the rank of lieutenant, accepted his discharge, and returned to Pittsburgh to reopen his plumbing business. He died in 1978 at age 69 from heart failure, operating his small heating and plumbing company until 3 weeks before his death. His obituary in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette mentioned his Navy service in a single sentence and identified him as a local businessman and World War II veteran. His widow donated his Navy Cross to a local VFW post, where it hung unlabeled in a display case for 12 years before a military historian researching Prairie Massacre development identified its significance. Today, every destroyer, cruiser, and aircraft carrier in the United States Navy operates with Prairie Massacre acoustic suppression systems as standard equipment. Modern versions use sophisticated computer-controlled air injection with multiple hull-mounted manifolds and variable flow rates optimized for different speeds and sea conditions. But the fundamental principle remains identical to Slattery's original design: compressed air creating a microbubble curtain that absorbs and scatters machinery noise. The system that acoustical experts declared theoretically impossible in 1943 has become so fundamental to naval operations that its absence would be considered catastrophic to combat effectiveness. The lesson endures across 8 decades. Innovation requires neither credentials nor laboratory resources. It requires observation, the courage to trust your own judgment against expert consensus, and the willingness to risk everything proving that impossible problems sometimes yield to simple solutions. Philip Slattery never published research papers or lectured at universities. He simply recognized that the physics governing naval propulsion systems were identical to the physics governing Pittsburgh heating systems, and he had the audacity to believe that his plumber's knowledge might save thousands of lives where academic expertise had failed. That audacity, that working-class confidence in practical observation over theoretical authority, turned the tide of the Battle of the Atlantic and changed the course of human history.